Hello and welcome to Guiding Gettysburg. Today I would like to talk about Gettysburg's railroad station. It has been here since the 1850s and has played a very important role in Gettysburg's history. It has witnessed so many events, so many famous people coming and going, and so many people. And let me give you a little bit of background about this railroad station. It's located on Carlisle Street. And by the time the 1850s rolled around, Gettysburg was a pretty prosperous little town. There was many cottage industries, a pretty good-sized population, and people coming and going, but their only way to do that was by horse and wagon. There were 10 roads leading in and out of Gettysburg, and that made Gettysburg a hub for transportation in the area. Businessmen in town realized that they needed a new system for transportation beside the horse and buggy, and they talked about developing a railroad in town. Of course, when you talk about building a railroad, you need money, so some of the popular men in town and businessmen decided that they would raise enough money and build a track that would go from Hanover through Gettysburg and eventually down into Maryland. By December of 1858, the line from Hanover, Pennsylvania to Gettysburg had been completed. It was some 16.5 miles. The gauge for the railroad was a lighter gauge than what was normally used. So that meant that freight cars could not be used on this line, only it was for passengers. And the people of Gettysburg thought this was wonderful, that they could go in a little over an hour to Hanover instead of the long, arduous ride on a horse and buggy. Gettysburg was beginning to prosper, and this meant that businesses would grow and thrive because of this new railroad. By May of 1859, the station had been completed. It was a beautiful Italianate architecture with a cupola at the top and a bell in the cupola. It had a loading platform of 110 feet, and people could be undercover when they went out to board the train. There was a roof over the top, as you can see in these photos. Probably the most important role that the Gettysburg Railroad Station played was during the Civil War. Soldiers came in from all areas of the state to the railroad station, and they were dispersed throughout Gettysburg. On June 26, 1863, Jubal Early's men ruined several of the freight cars and tore up the bridge over Rock Creek, disabling the railroad station until July 10, 1863. As you know, this was such an important time in Gettysburg's history. No railroad meant no communication and no transportation for soldiers or anyone. The station played an important role during this time. It became a field hospital and also a place where bodies could be shipped back home. It was said that the loading platform at the station was filled with coffins, simply made wooden coffins, so the soldiers could be taken on train and going back to their hometowns. This was again after July 10th, because before that there was no trains of any kind going in or out. One of the happiest and most well-remembered times for the train station was when President Lincoln came to town on November 18, 1863, for the dedication of the National Cemetery. Lincoln's train arrived at the station around 6 o'clock in the evening, and a band greeted him, and all kind of citizens from Gettysburg turned out, and it was a wonderful time indeed. And people walked with the president up Carlisle Street to the David Wills House, which sits on the square in town. David Wills was a prominent attorney, and he was in charge of this whole dedication day ceremony. And he was proud to have the President's Day in his home that evening. The next day, Abraham Lincoln gave his famous Gettysburg Address, which would go down in history and put Gettysburg on the map forever. 2 other presidents would come into Gettysburg's famous little railroad station. One was Teddy Roosevelt, and the other one was Calvin Coolidge. Now, by the time World War I rolled around, the Spanish influenza came with it. There were 175 soldiers that were killed here by the flu. Their bodies were taken away by railroad cars and taken back home. And unfortunately, the trains were being used for death again. We never thought we would see this happen again. In 1938 was the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, and many soldiers came into town on the train for this event. Many of these men were in their mid-90s, believe it or not, and they attended this event for the last time. So it was very special for everyone involved. Because of the invention of the automobile and airplanes, train travel became less frequently used, and Gettysburg noticed a large decline in their travel and tourism over the train. So they could no longer keep it open financially. So in December of 1942, the train made its last trip to Baltimore, Maryland. And this would be the last trip ever for this train. The station is now owned by the National Park Service, and it has been closed because of the COVID restrictions. And we're not sure when it will open, but we know that it will open again. And if you have a chance, please stop by and see it. It's a wonderful building inside, and it makes you think about the people who have been there before, and even the great man, President Lincoln. I think about him all the time when I'm in that area, and what it must have been like on the day he came into town. I hope you like my stories. I try very hard to make them interesting for you. So please tell your friends about us and subscribe if you can, okay? Thank you, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.